Hello ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, fellow shed heads, welcome to Captain of My Shed. I'm Captain Mikey. This is my shed, and on this episode we're going to be building a unit for my table saw. So now I want to put it into a unit that will also incorporate a router table for my router, my Triton router. And it's also going to have lots of storage to hold things like spare blades, router bits, all that kind of stuff. I'm also going to attempt to get a dust extraction system set up in it. This project has been going on for a while now as I get other bits and pieces done, always busy in the workshop. So you're going to see a lot of continuity issues. I'm filming this at the point of completing this video, so you're going to see this moustache longer, shorter, non-existent, and now back to where it is, so something to look forward to. Right, shut up Mike, enjoy it. So here we go. I'm cutting down, this is 9mm birch plywood, and the manufacturing process of this particular unit is going to be much the same as the workbench I built with the miter saw station in it. I'll link the two videos for that build below. This 9mm birch ply will form a front face, if you like, to a frame I'm going to make out of much cheaper materials, and here you can see those cheaper materials. This is just some scrap 18mm bog standard plywood that I'm ripping down here. That's all going to be laminated together, and the 9mm birch ply will form the face of that frame. It really is just an aesthetic choice. You could change the birch for ply and save for bog standard ply and save your money. But now we're on to the miter station, cutting all of that to length, ready for a glue up. Now I'm using these two bench dogs just as a reference to get these pieces nice and flush together, keeping that edge nice and flush. I don't want to have to do any kind of sanding down or planing to get those edges flush. It is workshop furniture, so it doesn't need to be absolute perfection. So this should be good enough. And actually, I can tell you can't really see on camera, it is really good. I don't actually have to do any planing at all. You can see I used a spacer there to make what is now becoming a mortise, I suppose, without actually having to cut it. This is a great technique, this sort of joinery. I think Palzan Woodworking calls it joinery by addition of materials, which I quite like the sound of. But yeah, you get the picture. And I'm also using that long rail there, which is the fence rail for the table saw. It's an upgraded rail, longer rail, to help me get the right measurements here as I lay everything out. Idiot. Hopefully you can see as you're watching this just how quickly this assembly comes together. This method is, well, I find it really quick. As long as you've got your cut list ready to go, you just get your pieces cut, glue and pin so you can keep working whilst the glue's drying, And yeah, there you go. There's one stretcher done. The next one coming along. The legs are already done. You can get the whole thing done easily inside an afternoon. And this is the fun bit. It's assembly time. And because you've been using stock material, sheet material, which is all the same thickness and pretty stable and standard and straight, it all slots together like Lego. It's kind of good fun, actually. All you got to do is figure out how to clamp it all together. Check that it's square, but if you've made your joinery nice and tight, it will be. Again, just by virtue of the method that we're using. Now, if you've been eagle-eyed, you'll have seen that the face of that frame slightly overhangs on one side of the cheaper plywood. The birch overhangs by a small amount, and you're about to see why. So yeah, you can see by leaving that overhang, I've got a surface to bear up against, and all I need to do is close up all the gaps, put a bit of pressure on, and I've got a nice square finish. These pieces adding strength and also covering up that ugly edge of the cheaper plywood. Same goes for this top piece here, covering up the plywood, adding strength and nice, just a nice fit. I'm now cutting drawer slides into the sides. This is very similar to the construction technique I used on the workbench, which is behind me in this shot, that I showed earlier on in this video. I ideally would cut these slots at 10mm, but I've only got a 9mm router. I don't know why, a 9mm router bit. So to compensate, I run one cut, and then I put that ruler in place just to offset the cutter by almost exactly 1mm, and I get that 10mm slot. The drawer runners that I make later, it's not really a drawer runner, I just extend the base of the drawer, which is made of a 9mm material, and that slides in those slots really nicely. So I am planning dust extraction to be integrated into this unit. That's why you can see that hole there that I've cut off camera. Same thing on the other side. There's a few bits coming up where I'm missing some shots on camera. Basically, I started rushing a bit before the Christmas period. I had lots of other things to get on with. Here I'm making the boxing in for what will be the router box, under table router box. But this piece will also serve to support the router table a particular distance off the base of that unit that I've just built. So it really becomes a bit more clear when we see another shot later on. But yeah, my apologies that this part of the video is not quite as thorough as the rest. Yeah, this stage is kind of unavoidable if you're using brad nails. They do leave the tiniest little hole that does need filling, really. If you want it to look nice and neat anyway, you can leave them exposed. Like I say, it is only workshop furniture. I do want it to look quite nice still, so hence filling in those holes. Those patches you can see will be sanded off later and then finished with Osmo like I'm doing here. So I'm just adding these casters. You'll probably recognize them from other videos. They're quite a good design. They have these rubber feet that can be raised and lowered so it lifts your caster up off the ground. So it can be a solid base if you need it to be, or rolling on casters. Once I got them fixed, Gotham's finest turned up and Batman was in the house. Okay, you stay there and you can watch from there because this is heavy. And it might not go the way I want it to.
I'm standing on here now.
Yeah, this is going to go on here.
If you say halfway, then I put my
So there he goes, Batman's buggered off. I always thought he'd be bigger than that. I guess TV adds a few feet. Okay, so what do we got here? This is a piece of Coran. It's used a lot in kitchen worktops. Now, if you're building this yourself, don't use Coran. It's a little bit of a bugger to work with. It really stinks. It's basically like a man-made stone, but it's a resin with what seems to be like a fine aggregate in it, and it behaves pretty much like a like a stone, but it cuts a bit better. I've got an old blunt blade in my plunge saw, which is what I've used to cut it. If you're building this yourself, you'd use something like a decent thickness, decent quality MDF, probably with a laminated top. But I'm trying to save cost, and a friend of mine was throwing this out. So I think it's going to work well. It kind of matches my colour scheme apart from anything else. But it's also a decently flat. It's not perfectly flat, but it's flat enough. And it will do the job until I can upgrade it. But it's going to look nice, I think, and it's going to work well. So that's what we're doing. And today's challenge is to cut the hole for the router plate to sit in. So wish me luck. Yeah, all I've done here is made a very simple jig just to keep the forstner bit that I'm using from slipping and skidding over the surface, and so that I get a nice neat cut on this hole. I'm going to do all four corners. I'm going to take this outside though, because as I mentioned, when you cut this stuff it really does stink. Using the plunge saw here was surprisingly good. It left a really nice clean finish. I didn't have much work at all to do once I'd finished cutting in between the holes. Just a little bit of filing to finish off the corners, and the hole was cut and it was nice and accurate. I mentioned before that you probably wouldn't use Coran if you didn't have it free. One, because it's a little bit tricky to work, although it does seem to be doing better than I expected. But two, I was forced into using this thickness of material, having chosen it. And that meant that I had to add these pieces that you see me gluing in now, instead of routing a step into the surface, which would have allowed me to fix the plate to the step or the rebate that I would have made had I used, let's say, a 20mm plywood or MDF here. I scratched up the surface of the Coran underneath just to give the epoxy something to grip onto, and it did seem to hold really well, actually. You can see down the sides of the top here as well, I've got a couple of strips, and they're just to make the thickness the same thickness as the top of my table saw, which will help me out later when I come to fit the fence rail. And as you can see from this initial test, it fits. Like a glove! And although it does fit like a glove, I do want to have a little bit of adjustment available to me. So I'm just going to put in the corners of the plate here a threaded hole that I can fit just a grub screw in, and that will allow me some adjustment. The plate is maybe a fraction of a millimeter lower than the surface, which is what I wanted. It's a slightly thinner material than the Coran that I've used. So if I'm really careful, I can drill just the thickness of the plate without going all the way through. Pop a grub screw in there that I can adjust from the underside. And now I'll be able to level that plate up about as perfectly as I'm ever going to get it. An important point if you're fitting this router to a router plate, this plate is not designed for this router, and if, like me, you're having to drill your own hole to allow the turning arm to attach to the mechanism that works the uplift feature on this router, you're going to have to mount it at a slight angle, so that if you have a router fence, for example, you can move that fence all the way forward without covering that hole and making that handle useless. Just a quick tip, really, and you can see now what I'm talking about. You just want to be forward of that center line so that you can slide a fence most of the way forward. Now, something else I didn't show on video was the making of those two slots, but it was done exactly the same as the way I cut the hole for the router plate. 2 holes either end, and then the plunge saw to finish up and join those holes together. And there we go, we've got the fence fit. This is a UJK fence. I've put a link to some of the UJK accessories that you can get for router tables. That's in the description below if you're interested. Next up, we're fitting the extended table saw fence rail to the underside of the Coran top sort of side extension table. And I don't know if you remember earlier on in the video, you could see a couple of strips of wood running down the side of that Coran top to make it the same depth as the tabletop, and this is why. It's so that I could attach this nice and securely underneath. It looks pretty neat, and it was nice and straight, and it holds that top nice and secure and level with the top of the table saw. Now I'm cutting some parts for some small drawers that are going to sit next to the router. The green coloured MDF there are going to be the bases, and this birch ply is the remainder of what I had left, and that's going to be the front face of these drawers. Okay, now I'm just cutting this 6mm MDF into strips ready to make the drawer boxes. This is going to be a super quick drawer assembly, and not just because I've time-lapsed it here. You can see I'm using that offcut of MR MDF, the green MDF, just to keep things nice and square while I assemble. But it's glue with a dab of wood glue with a dab of super glue and a bit of accelerator to hold it in place. This way I avoid having to use clamps, and I can get this thing assembled really quick. Now I'm using that same technique, using the wood glue for strength once it's dry, and the super glue as a clamping force, if you like, to assemble the drawer boxes onto the base, using a scrap piece of MDF there just to line it up, make sure there's enough of the base sticking out of the sides to run in the drawer runners. And that is the box nearly complete, just the front faces to go. Now I'm just using Forstner bit and the bandsaw in a minute to create some finger pulls, basically, for these drawer faces. Video footage do the speaking here, it's pretty straightforward. And with the drawer faces glued on, that is those drawers complete, and that took me no time at all. They look neat, they work well, ideal, and it was super quick to make.
Now that's what I'm talking about.
That's what I'm talking about. You might have spotted in that last clip with the drawers, there's a little space at the top was not tall enough for a full-size drawer. So I knocked these few scraps up together and just had a little idea. I always need my router spanner to hand, my collet spanner. So I was just going to live in the top of that stack of drawers. I make a little leather loop here and screw that to the top of the drawer front, and that will make a really nice little drawer pull for this top drawer.
Yeah.
ready to do it with you.
Or like this, Dad.
Nice. Cool. Works nicely. Now, I don't remember where I got this foam from, this kind of layered foam. It's not difficult to find. It's probably off Amazon again. But it works really well for this. I just drill holes. It actually drills surprisingly well through that top layer. And yeah, before I know it, I've got a bit tidy to fit in that drawer. And for now, we're done. Thanks very much for the people that made it to the end here. This is the end, I promise. I just thought I'd go through what we've managed to achieve in this video and what needs to be done to complete this project. So we built this nice solid frame, pretty cheap, pretty quick, and it's on casters, those casters with the little feet that rise up so that we can lift it up off the casters if I need a bit more of a solid base. Built the router plate into this surface, and that's a nice addition with these little T-slots for the UJK router fence that I was gifted. So we also managed to get some drawer slides cut into these sides here. The drawer's yet to come, so that'll come in a minute. And also at the end face of this, we've got the small drawer unit which houses the spanner and the different bits that I've got. There is space there for even more bit storage if I need it in future. One of the other big improvements that I made is I took this, which was the existing fence that sat on here, and swapped it out for this much longer fence rail. I probably couldn't get much more capacity and still walk around the machine comfortably given the size of my workshop, so that's been ideal. So that's what we got done. What's coming next? What else do we need to do? So I need to make the drawers for these drawer slides that I mentioned to give me more storage where I can keep spare blades and bits and pieces that are used with the saw. Any small jigs and things that will go in there too. I need to, there's some improvements I've got planned for the fence itself to make it a bit more versatile. I'm going to make it so that it can hold a push stick so it's right there instead of searching for it. I'm probably going to make it, try and make it a little bit more rigid for when I lock it up, and add as well a tape so I've got an accurate measurement and I can use the tape instead of measuring between blade and fence. That would be handy. What else do we need to do? Yeah, the dust extraction that I've got, it is working, but I'm going to reroute it and have it kind of integrated into the unit and have a system that will allow me to have overhead dust extraction for both the saw and the router table, and some sort of quick change system so that I can swap between router table and table saw very quickly. I've already cut some holes into the unit ready for that system to be installed. I need to make a few tweaks to it first though, so watch this space. That is something else to come. I'm also going to properly box in the router so that it can have a dust extractor on it, and it'll be a little bit quieter as well, I suppose. And I also am going to have a power switch like this one on the front face of this so that the router can run off that. So those are some of the things that are in the pipeline to finish off this project, but I'm really pleased with the way it's going so far. I can use everything that is here now. The table saw, perfectly usable. You've seen me using it possibly in other videos, and the router table, same thing. So it's just a case of sprinkling a little bit of glitter onto this project now, just to finish it off and make it a really nice little unit for my workshop. Once again, thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it. It's been a long time coming, this video, because this has been a kind of slow work in progress. But I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you next time. Take it easy.